This morning we are continuing a series on marriage. If you came and you worshiped with us yesterday, if you came yesterday, you were very lonely. In fact, unless you had a key, you couldn't get in here. And if you're visiting, you've got a key, we need to talk. But if you worshiped with us last week we looked at the horror of Adam's marriage, of Adam's way of doing marriage. We looked at the fall and how it turns us in and it makes us selfish. And selfishness is deadly nowhere more so than it is in marriage. If you function selfishly in your marriage, it is death. And those of you who have experienced that know good and well what I'm talking about. And to some degree, all of us children of Adam know what I'm talking about. The broken marriage is miserable. And Adam is always broken in everything he does. And our Adam inherited nature, it drives us. The fall, we fall into it, we join with him, and we become partakers in Adam's nature, and we are broken. And you can function that way if you want to. But in my sermon last week, I covered in kind of a general way the truth that something better has come. And this week, we get to look at what that looks like. In the reading this week, what we heard from Ron, from God, you'll probably not hear words more counter to our culture than the words that we are hearing. But I will suggest that in some ways, we're going to need to hear words that are counter to our assumptions as well. Because Adam in us sometimes reads these passages and frankly gets it all messed up. Remember that it is the curse and not a blessing when God says to Eve and to all of humanity through her ears that your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. That is the curse. We who are followers of Jesus Christ are being liberated from the curse and set free from living that way. But you do realize that probably nowhere do we live the curse sometimes more powerfully than we do as we try to obey Ephesians 5, beginning in verse 22 through the end of the chapter. Because so often we read this thing through a prism of Adam's eyes. We read it as though the salvation that is ours in Jesus Christ and the rescue from that curse has not happened. And here's what I mean. In so many Christian marriages, the things that we hear from Paul end with the word submit and love. And that means that a woman has a duty to lay down her will all the time. A man never does. The man's just going to have warm affection in his heart for his beautiful slave. And then the woman is supposed to lay down her will. It's a commandment from God. But the man isn't. Oh, he's got to do some good stuff for her. He's got to make sure she eats. It's right there in the text. It says so. But the idea that that a husband should submit to his wife, well, that isn't there. Look again. It is there. And in fact, I had us begin in 21 on purpose. If you actually want the full sentence in Ephesians 5, you really can't start in 21. It starts instead all the way back up in verse 18. And really, if you want to get the point, you might have to go all the way to the beginning of the chapter. But beginning in verse 18, it says, "Do not get drunk with wine, for that leads to debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in the heart, melody to the Lord in your heart, and giving thanks in all things or everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. And that's so obviously all about church, and it has absolutely nothing to say about the Christian marriage. And why are you starting in verse 21? You really ought to start in verse 22. Well, I think what's going on here is that Paul is talking about church. He is indeed. But when he gets to this part about submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, it immediately makes him think of what the marriage ought to look like. And he moves into it naturally as breathing. That people submitting to one another, lifting one another up, is the nature of the Christian marriage. That both husband and wife are called to lay their will down and not demand their own way. Both husband and wife, both roles are redeemed and rescued from the curse. But so often we read this thing, we tell our ladies, now women, you have to submit. And you realize we're right about that. That is true. Because it's here in the Scripture. Because it's so obviously there. And I'm sorry, that runs so counter to our culture, which is all about the liberation of women from oppression, that it sometimes says, and women ought to have haughty attitudes. That's what our culture seems to say, that you can't really be liberated from oppression unless you kind of take on something of haughtiness. Well, no, that isn't true. You're called, ladies, into a submissive place. But gentlemen, so are you. So are you. The fact of the matter is, for the most part, though, we read this thing missing what Paul is really saying and the stuff that's really, really normative for us. The thing that we often read, because it does somewhat run counter to our culture, is that what's normative for us is that Paul is laying out Christian roles for husbands and wives. It seems to be what he's talking about. Whereas the truth is actually a little deeper than that. And we see it most clearly in the role of the wife. He has very little to say to wives in comparison to how much he has to say to husbands. It's just 3 verses and then a little brief mention there at the end. Whereas to men, it's 7, 8 verses? There's so much more said to the husband than to the wife. Why is that? Well, our culture is vastly different from the ancient culture. The ancient culture that existed prior to the beginning of the redemption of the race. The curse functioned in much more powerful ways in ancient Rome than it does in modern America. Because the curse has been so diluted by the presence of Christ that things can change and ideas can be born that even in the unbeliever can have some power. But in the ancient world, saying to a woman, now you need to submit, it's as though Paul is standing beside a river and saying, you need to be wet and to flow. You know, it's the nature of the thing. Saying to a wife in the ancient world, be submissive, is like saying to air, be breathable, or to water, be wet. Of course she's going to be submissive. Duh. If she's not, he'll beat her until she is. In our world, that is a horror, that domestic abuse should ever go on. Folks, what if that thing wasn't in our culture, that taboo? What if it wasn't considered taboo and bad and strange for a man to beat his wife? How much violence do you think would go on? You know, there is no ancient taboo against this. They didn't have PSAs with a little rainbow that said, the more you know. They didn't have those. There weren't, movies like Sleeping with the Enemy where someone runs away from a husband who's beating her, who's so controlling, and it's heroic that she shoots him in the end. And you go, yay! Those stories were not being told. The stories that we're being told is, wife, submit to your husband, especially because I'm going to beat you up if you don't. So the idea that Paul would enter into the Christian's home, that has been born of that kind of cultural milieu, and say to a wife, submit to your husband, he's not saying anything to her that she does not already know. But why? Why does she live out that role? She's going to be doing it anyway in the ancient world. She's going to live out the role of submissive wife because the word submissive and wife in the ancient world are redundant. It's just part of what it is, but why is she doing it? Well, listen to the Word of God. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as, and here's the normative thing that crosses all cultures everywhere, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and himself its Savior. As the church submits to Christ, so wives should submit to their husbands in everything. She's going to be submissive anyway. It's a given. It's part of the nature of their culture, but why is she doing it? She is submitting to the husband to tell the story of the gospel. She is submitting to her husband because of what she believes about Jesus. And she's saying, I want people who see me and look at me to know that church is real, that Jesus is real. And that they'll be able to see the Christian story in the way that I live my life. So that as I am submissive, I'm doing it not because he'll beat me if I don't, but I'm doing it to be like Jesus and his church. I'm doing it so that people who look at my relationship can see the truth. And Jesus models what submission looks like. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he is the most submissive man that there ever was on the face of the earth in his relationship with God. As he kneels there, we're not looking at a milquetoast weakling who says, yes, God, whatever. Who has no opinion, no belief system, and no thoughts. He stands there and he very clearly articulates what his will is. He says, I don't want this. But I will lay my will down. Now that you have heard it, and I know you heard it, and I have no doubt that you respect me, that you love me, that you honor me. Now that you've heard it, it doesn't have to be my way. I lay my will down. And there Christ models, not just for you ladies, but for you ladies, for all of humanity, what it looks like to submit, to lay the will down and say, it does not have to be my way, to step down, not up. And by doing that, the women lift up their husbands. They pick them up. They build them up. They bless them by saying, I will not fight with you. I will submit my will to yours and be good to you. Now, that is stinking hard. I don't know that. I don't know what it's like to be a wife, but I know what it's like to be married to one, and I feel so badly for Ashley. Because it would be so easy to do if she were doing this with God. It is easy to do when she does this with Jesus because she knows He'll never be selfish. She has no such guarantees with me. There's no certainty that I will always get it right and that I will always be good to her. Now, goodness knows I'm trying. I want to be the husband that God has called me to be. But she does not have a guarantee that I will do this perfectly. And so she has to submit her will to an imperfect man. And there are going to be times when that's going to feel like death to her. And it's going to be dreadful and awful for her. And Jesus has called her to take up the cross and follow Him. She's not doing any of this for me. She's doing it for Him. It is discipleship in the Christian marriage. where you say, it does not have to be my way. I lay my will down. Now, that's for the ladies, and that's countercultural. Our culture doesn't like that. Our culture seems to love what it says to men, or at least at first glance. Men, you get married because of love in this culture, right? And the reason people assume I'm going to get married is because I've loved this person so much, and I delight in them, and I want to be with them, and they make my life so happy and good, and that becomes the purpose of marriage. When we read this through our American eyes, what it says to men becomes milquetoast, weak stuff. And it doesn't have the teeth to us that it had to the ancient audience. Because while to women, Paul is saying submit, and that's like saying water is wet. To men, he's saying love your wives, and that's like saying water is on fire. In the ancient world, the idea that a husband would love his wife was crazy. You don't love your wife. You don't have to love your wife, because that's not why ancient people got married. Ancient people got married for the sake of their honor, not for the sake of their love. Remember how ancient marriages even happened? I wouldn't have picked my spouse. The choice would have been done for me by my parents, who would have made an arrangement for me with an equally honorable family. And so the two families would come together, and inasmuch as a man wants to have a wife, he wants to have a good wife who makes him look good, who forwards his name, who makes him important, and who has good sons for him, and maybe a daughter if you have to. That's the ancient world. I'm not joking. I mean, I know it's a little funny, but I'm very serious when I say that's the ancient mindset. And the idea that a man would love his wife is insane to the ancient man. The thing that would be the target of love would be other men. And I'm not talking about homosexuality. I'm talking about brotherly friendship. It's a man that an ancient man would let close. He would tell his problems to. That he would bare his soul to. And the idea of doing that to a weak, uneducated, broken woman? No. That's not what's going to happen. It is to this sort of man that Paul says, husbands, love your wives. And how? As Christ loved the church and did what? Gave himself up for her. Do you honestly think you can argue that you are not called into submission to your wife when you hear that? Really? He's calling you to love the church, love your wife the way that Christ loves the church. And what did he do for the church? He put himself and his demands and his needs and his wants dead last. He did it in the garden when he submitted to God. He submitted for the sake of the church. He laid down his will. And he was willing to take the nails in his hands and his feet. He gave up his will. Headship in a Christian marriage is not like kingship is among the tyrants of this earth. Headship in a Christian marriage is about purposefully giving yourself away and not demanding your way, not putting yourself first, laying down your will to lift up your wife. It's about putting yourself last, not first. It's about being willing to die inside, and it will feel like that because there are going to be times when she doesn't deserve that. I mean, she's a sinner too. And submitting for her is hard sometimes. It doesn't matter. Christ didn't call you to an easy path. He called you to the cross. And so you laid down your life for her. And what is your life? Your wills, your desires, you're insisting on your own way. You lay that down. Just as Christ laid it down. and didn't demand his own way. And Paul, knowing that he's dealing with men who this is foreign to them, the idea that a man would have to love his wife is just bizarre and strange. He knows that's what he's dealing with, so he unpacks this a great deal. He says, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Why did Christ give himself up for her? So that she could come fully alive. So that she could become who God wants her to be. Christ gave himself up for the church so that the church would flourish and grow and thrive. In many marriages, both Christian and non-Christian, women are pushed down and not encouraged to thrive, not encouraged to grow and to think and to become. And what the man is supposed to do is, no, I give myself up so you can come fully alive, so that you can be who God wants you to be, so that you can become more and more the person who is my companion in life, who is fully and intellectually and wonderfully alive and a blessing to me and to you, and this so that he can present her to himself. He's done all this so that he can be fully and completely pleased in his marriage. And he's saying that's what you do as Christian husband. You encourage your wife to do well and to thrive and to be blessed and to be beautiful. He goes on. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as they love their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hates his own flesh, but he nourishes it and he cherishes it just as Christ does the church. And guys, what he's telling you is, you know what? Your body will let you know when you're hungry. Your body will let you know when you've hit it with a hammer. Right? Not that I think any of us are hitting our wives with hammers, but when you hurt, your body signals that there is pain, that there is trouble. Don't you dare ignore the trouble of your wife. When she comes to you to say there's something difficult in our home, it's very easy to say, well, I understand that, but manage that. I'm going to go do my work. And he's saying, no, when your body is hungry, you feed it. When it hurts, you take care of it. Well, you love your wife that way. When she comes to you in pain or trouble, it comes as demand. It does. So does your body. It says, give me food now. It doesn't say, I'll wait till, Thursday's fine. No, it says, no, I'm hungry now. Well, we come to one another with demands on each other's time and resources. In marriage, this happens daily. I need you. Well, and you need me, and this is happening. When that happens, when the spouse comes to the other with pain saying, help me, you don't get to say, yeah, whatever, I'll get to that. If I have leftover time, you can have it. But right now, I want to watch the game. All right, and the Bruins are on. Right now, I want to watch this movie. Sylvester Stallone is shooting somebody. Right now, I have to think about my job. The TPS reports are due. And you come last. No. When your body is hungry, you respond to it. When your wife is in trouble or when your wife has need, you respond to her, just as you do to your own body. Why? Because you're submitting your will to her. You're putting yourself in response to her needs. You're cherishing her as you do yourself. Why? Because Jesus did that for you. He didn't look at you and say, well, I see you have a sin problem, but I have TPS reports to file. He didn't do that. He said, no, I'm blessed. I will die for you. Your need I will care for. So Jesus has done this. He goes on even further. He says, therefore the man shall leave his father and his mother. For no one ever hated his flesh but nourished, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. The reason that Christ is responsive to your needs is because He feels them. Because we are His body. And so He feels your trouble and He responds to it. And He's saying to the husband, feel the trouble of your pain, of your wife's pain. Respond to her. Be with her. Care for her. Remember, all this is alien to the ancient church's way of, not the ancient church, the ancient humans' way of thinking about husbandry. Not the care of plants, but being a husband. It was alien to them to think that you're supposed to love this way. All of this, he says, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and here's the key to understanding what Christian marriage is supposed to look like. And I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. What he's saying, what Paul is saying is that when you live your life in your marriage, it ought to tell the story of the relationship between Jesus and the church. It ought to tell the story of the gospel. So that the way you live your marriage looks like the gospel. It looks like the curse when one of us has power over the other. When we push each other down. When we ignore each other's needs. That looks like Adam and Eve, not Christ and the church. But when we love one another and we step down as Jesus stepped down, that looks like the gospel. When we care for one another and lift one another up, that looks like the gospel. When instead of selfishness, it is replaced with selfless love, that looks like the gospel. And he's saying your life, your marriage, should look like Christ and the church. It should look like Jesus. Your life should look like Jesus. Folks, this is discipleship. It is being Christ's disciple in your marriage. Because Jesus will come to you and say, put away anger, put away lust, put away deceptiveness, put away lying, and put away retaliation and revenge, and put away hate. Put it all away. Well, in married relationships, all of that stuff springs up. The stuff, the trouble that we have to deal with springs up. And the way to escape from it is to step down. To deny the self. When you're really, really mad at your wife or at your husband because he's been a clod again and he tracked the mud all over the place and he turned on the TV and he hasn't talked to you for 2 days. When you're mad at her because she spent the money that you knew she couldn't, and she did it, and you're mad. You're really, really mad. Step down. Set it down. Put down your anger and put him first. Put her first, because that's what Christ has done. And tell the story of Jesus in your relationship, which is what he sums up with. He says, however, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. He's saying you both are going to step down. Take care of her as though she was you. Respect him and be good to him. Be down for one another. Step down. Now, the most amazing thing happens when this is going on. When we do what verse 21 says, and we submit to one another, not because they deserve it. They don't. They're fallen. But when we do this for Christ, when we submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, then I step down to lift Ashley up, even as she has stepped down to lift me up. And we find each other putting one another first. And we find that we are in a race to get to the back of the line. And we are in a race to show one another more honor. And the most strange thing happens, because you can never pick one another up off the ground, but in this you do. You end up soaring. It lifts you above trouble. You find that the image of God is alive in you when both of you, in selfless love, are putting the other first. And you find that you are first, not because you demanded your own, not because you insisted that your needs be met, not because you took, but because you receive. what was given, what was selflessly given by the other, even as you were giving yourself away as well. And folks, this is beautiful. When it becomes about who gets to be in charge, who gets to have their way, who gets to insist, who is it that gets to make the decisions around here? I get to make the decisions, and therefore they're all going to benefit me. That's Adam. Don't tell the story of Adam and Eve in your marriage. Tell the story of Christ and His church in your marriage. The Christ who loves you and gave Himself up for you. Therefore, you give yourself up for your spouse. And you will both lift one another up. It's amazing how this protects us from so much evil. Fights dissipate when we give to one another, when we make decisions by consensus and care and loving one another instead of insisting on our own way. The fights dissipate. The adultery, we are protected from it. Because how can anything out there offer me what is being offered to me now? When I'm being so honored and lifted up. And when I have the opportunity to give myself away. What's better than that out there than here? The Christian marriage is beautiful. Why would we want anything else? I know that in this room there are marriages that have been doing this for decades. That there are some of you here who have been loving and delighting in one another for longer than I have been drawing breath. And for you, I thank my God. It is wonderful to be able to look at a Christian marriage. Not that I think you're always 100% successful at this, but I see God working His success in you. And we who are following after you, who are younger in years, and see you and what you have done as you have lived this out, we thank our God. There are also in this room marriages that are struggling. Marriages that are in pain. Dreadful pain. Those who are further along than the rest of us would call us to the wonder of what God can do in your home. Say, follow us. It's worth it. And you think, well, but I'm going to die if I go through this. Yes, you will, and you'll be raised up by Christ. Give yourself away for your spouse. And not because they deserve it, but because Jesus has done it. Tell the story of Jesus in your marriage and you will be lifted up. Because just as Christ stepped down, the Father lifted Him up. And that's what He does when we do what He said here. He raises us up. And if you look into your own life and you say, this is not describing me. I'm putting myself first. I've become so focused on my own needs, I can't even see him anymore. I can't even see her anymore. All I can see is me. Hear the call of Jesus to discipleship. Deny yourself. Take up your cross and follow Jesus in your marriage. It may be that you came here this day and you need the prayers of the saints for your marriage. We want to pray for you. It may also be that you came to church this day and you came carrying a burden that has nothing to do with what I've talked about. But you need the care and the compassion of the church. We are here, and because of Christ among us, we have compassion. And we will bless you if you want and need the blessing. If you need the prayers of the saints, let us know. We want to pray for you. And if you came here this day and you want to begin your walk with Christ today, and do that. You know, there's water right here, and we will wait on lunch. We sure will, in order to do that. If this morning you were subject to the invitation of Christ Jesus, why don't you come right now while we stand and sing.